Hey up lads and lasses, Danfire here, back again with some more GR2 content for you today. So today we are going to go through and redo the ship progression a little bit, and this is due to the fact that since the missile balance changed and torpedo balance changed, there is some more viable options and some different builds for newer players. So I'm going to go through each of the ships and the progression where you can get them from, and show you a little build for them as well, with the exception of the Rainmaker, but we'll get into that in a second. So first off, we have the frigates. You have the Blast. I really love Blasts. I think they're great little ships. With how the AI works, most of the time your Blast is what gets targeted by the most damaging ships. So you can use the Blast in a role to kite and dodge and keep the enemy's main damage dealing away from yourself. So this is a little build that I've got together at the moment. It's make sure you do keep a small thruster. If you can get a better small thruster, do. If you get a blue, for example, do put it on. Unfortunately, I've only had one blue, and that's currently sat on my monster on this server. But fast operational network, it helps a little bit. It's not necessary. I use it here because I've got nowhere else to put it at the current moment. These nanotorps I'm building out because I'm planning on getting an Ipos. But weapon-wise, you just want 4 weapons of the same type usually. And it doesn't matter which ones you go for. So if you like lasers, you can put lasers on here. If you want torps, you can put torps on here, or missiles, or gorse, and snaking, and projectiles, etc. I do recommend having an EMP on here. It helps quite a lot in PvP. A lot of people early game will be running these small laser main guns, and having an EMP, if you can get hold of one, you just fly your suicide frigate into them, drop an EMP, they can't fire their lasers. Most of the time, new players seem to just upgrade the main laser, so you've just killed all of their damage for the next 40 seconds. Don't be that person. Upgrade your weapons, ignore the main laser. Well, don't ignore it, do use it a little bit, but be aware that you will probably drop it at some point. Now, the Blast you can pick up very easily. You get the Blast in zones 1 and zones 2. So in zone 1, because there is only one planet in here, you can pick up 5 comms, and in zone 2, 3, you can pick up another 5 comms. You only need 20 comms to build this, and quite often these will give more than the amount of comms, more than 5 comms. 5 comms is the bare minimum, so that means in 2 days you can always build a frigate. More often than not, you can build 3 in 2 days because you get the extra comms, etc. Now, the reason I really like them and the reason I don't build Rainmakers, I will show you right here. So in 13.2, we have my BR, my minimum BR clearance, so we can watch this. As you can see, I've got a Blast, a Monster, NATO, and a Fog in here. These are all low level. It's at 13.2, so it's earlier on. But this is one of the reasons that I like the Fog, and it's this ability that it has to just kite an enemy around the entirety of the game. So we zoom out a little bit. What I've done here is I've got all my battleships and my cruiser and my frigate moving down into this bottom right corner. We call that corner tanking. It's just a nice way to pull damage away from your ships, deal with little pockets of damage, like you can see here. This entire fleet can't do anything against me while I kill this part of the fleet off. Then I can concentrate on this fleet, and then finally the Red Dragon, which is the goal of this mission to kill. Now, if you notice there, the UAVs were just flying around that Red Dragon. That's because that Red Dragon has targeted my little frigate, and those UAVs were out of range. This Red Dragon's missiles don't do that much damage, but its UAVs do a lot of damage in this mission. So stopping those UAVs from firing in the first place is really, really good. As you can see now, I've now started to move my frigate. I've kited this guy in far enough that I want. So I'm going to run this frigate around. The UAVs have come out. They're going to try and chase down this frigate. But these UAVs are ignoring my damage-dealing ships. And this is the importance of this frigate. Because this thing is now kited the UAVs off around here, this Red Dragon has no UAVs on any of my ships dealing immense amounts of damage. You saw there, it's only been, those UAVs have only been on my frigate for a few seconds, and it's already lost its entire shield and a quarter of its health. It's out of range again, and there's the timer gone on the UAV, so now it can't launch anymore. But all I'm doing is just kiting this all the way around back to the top, pulling this ship as it goes, stopping those UAVs hitting my damage-dealing ships, and eventually letting me get the kill on this fairly quickly. I mean, I'm a little bit behind weapon-wise in this mission at the time I did this, but I was just trying to catch up because I missed a day, I think. But yeah, so UAVs back out, they're just flying around, not doing anything. So there's the importance, and this is why I prefer frigates over the Rainmaker, and it's due to the fact that you can't do that with a Rainmaker. I bring the frigate back in here because I've already lost the fogs. Well, the fog will probably go down, so I won't get 3-star, and I'm out of the time anyway, so I won't be able to make the 3 stars either there. I could keep this alive, but the time's gone anyway. I think actually it stays alive there anyway. So this is why I like the frigate, and the build I recommend is just make sure you get 1 thruster on it, 4 weapons of some description. Early on they are good damage dealers, around zones 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. You can use frigates to deal damage, you don't need to kite like that. Later on, that's where they have that transition period where the damage isn't going to be there, so don't worry about the weapons, just use it to kite around and stop enemies, like specific weapons firing. It's very good as well for enemies using lasers, because the main laser will target at it. It's too fast for the main laser to track, so you just run it around and it's nothing it can do. So frigates, the blast specifically, is very easy to come by. It's very easy to get. I wouldn't work on trying to get any of the other frigates or the destroyers because they get phased out very quickly. Let's talk a little bit about Rainmakers. So Rainmakers are torpedo boats. You want about 6 torpedoes on them. That's due to the CD on them. So 6 seconds it'll fire 3 torpedoes, and then another 6 seconds goes by and it'll fire the other 3. So you want to try and get 6 on here because the weapon cooldown is 13 seconds. So you're about in line there to allow for that. You can either run nanos on here or you can run HE. That's completely up to you. There is a reform for thermal damage, so in theory HE should get a bit more damage out than nanos, but in practice nanos are a little bit more consistent due to the multi-warhead feature of them. You're more likely to get hits. Again, I don't really like Rainstorms. I ran 2 on this server for a little bit with 2 cruisers and dropped one of the Rainstorms in favor of a frigate so I could start kiting again, because the Rainstorm cannot kite. I had a thruster on it and everything and I tried it, it just did not work. They have got better tank, they have got better damage output than a frigate, but the utility isn't there. Just to note that even though they got better tank, these are still very, very fragile ships. I know some people are still running a Rainstorm within their fleets, and they're basically saying even maxed out, it's just insta-popping all the bloody time. You can get Rainstorms, I believe, from zones 3 and 4. So if we come back out here, I believe 3.5 and 4.5 both give Rainstorms. Yep, Rainstorm 3.4 and 4.5, I believe, as well. Or click out the system. 4.5. And yeah, more Rainstorm comms there. They are slightly harder to build, needing slightly more comms. I personally don't think they're worth it. And your idea at the very start of the game is trying to rush through 1, 2, 3, 4, get into 5 as soon as you can, because this is where you get one of your mainstay ships that can be used late game in any fleet, and it will always do pretty well. And that's the Tornado. So we can get 10 comms in 5-3, 5 comms in 5-5, and 5 comms in 6-5. Now, the Tornado is an extremely strong ship. It's a projectile boat, so it makes it a really good stepping stone for monsters, which is one of the best ships within the game. So here's a little build. I run 3 snaking cannons. These are T3 Orellicons, which are... I have one, right? This one. So the Orellicon, however you pronounce that, turns into these snaking cannons. These snaking cannons are one of the highest damage dealing weapons in the game. Highly recommend them, even at blue. They're very, very, very strong. They'll out DPS purple Gorse. So bear that in mind. That's how strong blue Orellicons are. If you can get purple, you can get one from the missions. The rest you need to find in supply, or if you're lucky, comms from in Wolf. And you will be ready, set to go. Weapon-wise, the cannon is terrible, don't build one. And Gorse and Orellicons are very, very strong, so that's what you want on this ship. Now, you can fit up to 6 T3 weapons on a Tornado. I'm at a point in the game where a lot of weapons got taken off this Tornado and it was used to fit for my monster. So that's why it's kind of looking a little bit scant on here. But otherwise, yeah, it's got projectile damage bonuses. If we go to reforms, we've got even more kinetic damage bonuses as well. Plugins, you want to be running projectile and the durability. It's got a penetration, so it means that projectiles will ignore shields sometimes and sometimes even hit ships behind the ship that you're firing at. The damage will not exceed 7.3%. This is on all of the ships of this faction. And what that will do is it basically means it can't take more damage than 7.3% of the durability of the ship. Interestingly, on blasts, with that maxed out, a maxed out Duskmaker does no damage because it does too much damage to the ship, which is kind of funny to watch. The other specialization of this ship is anti-air. So it has AA aircraft weapon cooling. This is for the anti-aircraft ray guns. These do hit missiles and torpedoes as well. However, I do not recommend putting them on your ships. They just don't work particularly well. Even with all the bonuses from Warship feature and subsystem, they don't dish out enough damage to really deal with missiles in bulk anyway, and UAVs they can't even kill. So, as far as I'm concerned with anti-aircraft ray guns, the best thing you can do with them is salvage them and for their weapon cores to allow you to upgrade your other ships. So, from the Tornado, we're now looking at battleships, and this is where you have the variation a little bit. So we have the Fog. The Fog can be found in zones 7.5 and 8.5. They're quite easy to pick up. They're very easy to get hold of, loads of comms. I mean, I've nearly maxed out reforms, and we've only been on this server, I think, 2 weeks-ish now, getting around there. Just pump the calibration rate up a little bit on here. Not sure what calibration rate does for missiles, but we're going to test it out. Now, for the Fog, you need ideally 7 or 8 missile types, and this is due to the fact that missiles have a very long cooling time, so you need to try and fill up those 6-second weapon firing gaps as frequently as possible. It will fire between 3 and 4 missiles per 6 seconds. So having 8 is where the optimum is, but that does put you in a position where you can maybe only fit a T1 or T2 shield repair or transition device, etc. Since the update, I will now suggest that you can put missiles on this ship. You no longer need to go ignoring the subsystems and putting projectile, because projectile's king. The weapon balance is in a position where I can recommend missiles on here, and they work fairly well, which is great news. Other than the fog, you have 3 other battleships you can get hold of fairly easily. The Monster is the king. It is the best battleship in most situations, PvE and PvP. It has a slightly lower tank, but its DPS output is absolutely incredible. With Jim on it, you're looking to run 7 weapons, or 8 weapons if you can. Preferably a transition device on there as well. I only have a large prop, so that's what's currently on there. Subsystem-wise, you're looking at cooldown reduction. Just to note, I haven't been able to roll, but if you can get cooldown reduction on these missile subsystems on the fog, that's what you'd probably preferably be going for. Damage and cooldown. You want to try and get cooldown on both of the subsystems. When you do get cooldown on both subsystems, make sure your PT is between the 2 subsystems, touching both. This will have an increase in DPS. It'll have a lower alpha damage, but an increased damage per second. Increased damage per second will eventually outdamage the alpha, obviously, and will allow you to take on larger enemies a little bit more consistently. For now, though, because I don't have the cooldown I don't have the cooldown on the top subsystem, that's what I run at the moment. Snaking cannons. Max of 3 on a monster, and then 4 Gorse and a PT is ideally what you're looking for. At the moment, I don't have the room to get another Gorse on here. Otherwise, I'd have a Gorse down here and another Gorse there, and probably this transition ideally, but in this case, a prop up at the front here. Don't get that to 825 and 845, so we're a while away from there. Plugins, projectile damage, an armor plugin, preferably not this one. You either want standard or creature. There is also a reduced damage from penetration. I'd recommend that as well. Energy recovery is quite useful. It helps with the Umia tactical, so I recommend that there. And I have no CPU for anything else currently on here. Other than your monster, you have 2 other options. Unfortunately, I do not have them, but I can show you them. So if we go into shipbuilding, you can very easily get up a unicorn. Do not get up a unicorn. They're absolutely trash and a complete waste of time and space and resources. You're better trying to get the monster up. That's what I will say about the unicorn. If you must, you can run lasers or projectiles on them. It does sort of work, but they have a massive hindrance to themselves, which is this one. Confront the enemy head-on. Frontal damage reduced by 34%. Battleship has only frontal muzzle, which means it can't fire on the wing, which means it's reduced to 2 weapons every 6 seconds. Unlike every other battleship in the game, which can fire 4 weapons every 6 seconds. So it's half the damage. Even with the warship feature here, increasing its calibration rate and bullet speeds and all sorts. It has a very good tank against thermal damage though, which is something to note. I don't recommend building it though. Your other option that you can quite easily get hold of is an Ipos. Now, an Ipos I would sort of recommend earlier on. It has a similar, if not potentially higher damage output than a monster. The problem is you can't get them quite as easily. Because the monster, you just do arena, you can go into the arena store, you can buy 10 comms a week, plus the battleship box that's in the arena store can potentially give you another 5. At worst though, 5 weeks you can get a a monster out. You can technically get an Ipos out faster if you're willing to spend more Krypton. But yeah, So the Ipos is a torpedo boat, and this is why you're seeing nanos that have been upgraded on my frigate, and that's because I'm saving up to try and get an Ipos out because I want to test it out a bit more. What I have seen though is, I believe, 7 or 8 torpedoes on here, and it churns out the damage against stationary targets. It struggles to get damage application because of the way torpedoes work. They're slow moving, they fire in a straight line. A lot of ships just move out the way. Against a stationary target though, this thing brings so much damage output, it's absolutely crazy and potentially higher than a monster's capable of. The reason I recommend the Ipos now is because you could quite easily have a ship with these nifty little lasers on. These tractor ray guns, you get some for free from the storyline, and what they actually do is reduce the movement speed of enemies by 40%. If you can get them into a position where you're rotating and keeping up that 40% debuff, the ships you're firing up basically not going to be moving all that much, giving your Ipos the ability to just smash out a ton of damage against them. So yeah, Ipos is a ship you can definitely go for. Last but not least, you can easily grab hold of a Legion. This will pop up in store and star merchants similar to the Ipos. I sort of recommend them and I sort of don't. They're a fun ship, they're kind of cool. They do have a requirement. I personally think you shouldn't really be running a Legion unless you have a DMG, so you can get a dual DMG on it. And that's due to the fact that it doesn't have the best options for damage per second. It has a good alpha damage, but that's where it kind of sits and stays. So a Legion is possibility. Again, you can pick that up from a mall, from the items in the mall. Just to reiterate, monster battleship comms you can pick up from the arena store. You get the arena points by doing arena, believe it or not. And that's about it. You can move over to Frosts. I don't personally recommend them. They are good tanking ships, but at the same time, they're very low damage outputs, and I personally don't think that's worth it. At the point you can get a fog out, you can easily get a fog, a monster, and maybe an Ipos, or maybe you get a second fog out while working on a second monster, and a tornado out. So that's my suggestions and a couple of ship builds for you revolving around tornadoes, fogs, and monsters. Unfortunately, I don't have Iposes. When I have an Ipos out, I will be doing a video on it by itself, and that would just be the Ipos build, something for you guys to aim for. But yeah, that's more or less it. Make sure you R&D weapons, rush in, grab a tornado as fast as you can, because these things will last you till the end of the game quite easily. Use frigates in a position where you can use them for kite, and then they transition into your mining fleets anyway, thanks to their lovely little warship feature, increasing the mining capacity. Fogs are viable. You can fit them with projectiles if you still want to do that, but they are viable now with missile systems. Monsters are the king battleship. You can grab those from Arena. Iposes also very good. You can grab those in Star Merchants, and same for the Legion. I hope that helps you guys out, and I'll catch you next time.